Have you ever watched a genius at work lost in thought? What if the genius comes not from what they're thinking about, but what they're choosing to ignore? Every successful individual, from innovators to leaders, has a limited cognitive bandwidth. You, me, Steve Jobs, we only have 24 hours in a day, but what separates the brilliant minds is their ability to filter the noise. Not only will you need to learn how to choose what deserves your attention, you'll have to master the art of strategic ignorance to truly be at the top of your game. We often admire what the great minds do, but let's flip the script. Let's delve in what they don't and see if that's really where the difference is made. Enter the world of Alex. Every morning as she rides her train to workplace, her headphones stream inspiring podcasts of success stories. Her phone's browser has over 50 open tabs, DIY hobbies, vacation plans, and even a growing list of DMs, all while she's deciphering a variety of career paths and debating which of her 5 nearly identical yet subtly different smartwatches is the best. She's afloat in a sea of endless possibilities, yet feels directionless. It's not just Alex who's grappling with this, it's all of us. If you think back to a peaceful village square centuries ago, it's easy to see why this wasn't an issue. There was a simplicity of life, where farmers exchanged produce and children played with basic toys. Life's choices were clear, distinct, and immediate. Fast forward to today, and how would our ancestors react if they were thrust into our complex landscape? With a brain that isn't designed for modern life, it is our responsibility as individuals to implement strategies that filter out the non-stop noise and reduce life down to what actually matters. First, consider the concept of neural bandwidth. Our brains have a limited capacity of processing information at any given moment. And as the volume of information we're exposed to has skyrocketed thanks to the digital age, it's as though we're trying to channel a flood through a garden hose. The result? Cognitive congestion. The most effective way to combat cognitive congestion is with a mindset known as selective ignorance. Selective ignorance is not about lack of knowledge. Instead, it's intentionally choosing subjects and facts and even people that you do not wish to know about. Deliberately spending our time and energy involves some form of selective ignorance, where we actively decide to not engage in certain activities, to not learn about certain topics, and to not develop certain ideas. And in order to properly cultivate selective ignorance, we need to dive into 3 concepts and develop a system to force us to laser in what actually matters. The 3 we'll discuss in this video are called the paradox of choice, the mastery principle, and the liberation of limitation. So the paradox of choice. Imagine you've graduated from university and you're eligible to enter the business world. You have the opportunity to work at 2 high-paying companies, a tech startup with a mission you're passionate about, or a company headquartered in Europe, a place you've always wanted to live. And on top of all the career options, you're still considering doing more schooling. What seems like a dream scenario quickly leads into the feeling of being overwhelmed, as if you're drowning in choices, and you start over-analyzing every choice, trying to make a perfect decision. A decision that doesn't actually exist. This example, although obviously desirable, in some ways illustrates the broader point. Having too many options often comes with a lot of negatives. But there are ways to reduce choices and produce better outcomes. There's a famous story, commonly known as the jam study, that illustrates this point. 2 psychologists went to a gourmet food market and set up a tasting booth for Wilkin & Son jams, with the intention of analyzing purchase decisions. The duo had 2 test environments. On one day, the tasting booth would display an offering of 24 different flavors of jam. And on the next day, the selection would be limited to just 6 flavors. And although slightly more people browsed the booth when there were 24 flavors offered, the actual purchase decisions of the shoppers were extremely unexpected. Of the shoppers who stopped by the booth with 24 jams, 3% of people made a purchase. Of the shoppers who stopped by the booth with 6 jams, 30% of people made a purchase. 10 times as many people bought a jam when there were only a quarter of the flavors available for purchase. This is the paradox of choice, a phenomenon where an increase in the number of choices can lead to anxiety, paralysis of decision makers, or dissatisfaction with the chosen option. This counterintuitive idea suggests that while freedom of choice is essential, too many options can be detrimental for our well-being. So planning your life to maximize options, and while it might feel like it's the best idea, turns out it can lead to worse outcomes and sometimes stop you from making a decision at all. Steve Jobs knew this very well, that in order to achieve true excellence, he needed to define a very narrow path and set forward with full speed. And this was Jobs' real insight. You don't need to do everything to change the world. The limitation of options is what actually forges the way to a truly transformative product and reaching that mastery level. The next question becomes, how do we know what to say no to, and how do we effectively use the power of limitation so that we get the benefits of focus? This is shown in the early days of the iPhone's conception. Most smartphones on the market came with a physical keyboard. BlackBerry, for instance, was a dominant player in the business world, and their phones were known for their tactile keyboards. When Apple decided to venture into the phone business, Steve Jobs was adamant that the iPhone should not have a physical keyboard. He believed that a device that had a full screen interface where software would dictate the user experience, not hardware. There were, of course, a lot of challenges. The first was creating a responsive and accurate touch interface. Apple acquired Fingerworks, a company known for its touch-based technologies, to aid in this effort. Another challenge was designing a virtual keyboard that would actually be efficient and user-friendly. So when the iPhone was finally unveiled in 2007, it became revolutionary. The absence of a physical keyboard and the introduction of a full touchscreen interface set it apart from every other smartphone on the market. And it was a gamble that obviously paid off massively for Apple. In essence, Steve Jobs' vision and his insistence on a phone without a keyboard played a pivotal role in shaping the smartphone industry. The constraint of removing the keyboard forged a lot of creativity and what eventually became the iPhone. So with all this in mind, how can we practically add selective ignorance to our life? Learning how to cultivate selective ignorance is a long-term process where you need to find the right balance between the unproductive but enjoyable actives and the useful but more tedious actives. Pruning unproductive and tedious activities such as the wrong conversations, negative content, irrelevant ideas, and unhealthy choices is crucial for practicing selective ignorance. You also have to critically choose your information sources. Again, it doesn't mean that you should lock yourself up in a thought bubble, but rather be intentional about where you consume information. For new ideas, you might follow a handful of sources that you've carefully picked that have a diverse set of viewpoints that give you access to the new ideas without going overboard and getting bogged down with the ideas that aren't serving you. For timeless knowledge, you might aim for a mix of sources such as books, articles, courses, and podcasts, but you've carefully selected the right ones. And if you do find out that they aren't serving you or are holding you back in a way that you are comfortable removing them. Next, you might cut back on social media platforms, which can have a spectrum of intentions, attitudes, and behaviors all mixed into the platform. Or if you are still going to use them, you can go through and make sure that you unfollow the people that aren't serving you. Maybe they're creating something that's negative, time wasting, or just content that you don't want to be thinking about. Reflect on your learning journey too. It can be helpful to periodically assess your personal growth journey. What have you learned in the past few months? Which people helped you grow as a person? Are there any specific books, podcasts, blogs, courses that you felt were particularly helpful? How can you bring more of these into your life? And think about what hasn't been serving you and how can you have less of those in your life. And then also really important is to find your constraints and stick to them. Start to learn your own patterns and build rules against your common pitfalls. Selective ignorance has been a big part of my own life, but I would have benefited if I would have got more understanding of this sooner. When I was 23, I started a marketing company while living with my mom with very modest beginnings, but within a handful of years, we became one of the fastest growing companies in Australia and eventually had over 100 employees. And instead of knowing my pitfalls for a distraction, whilst building that company, I jumped into many new ventures: a teeth whitening company, a scarf company, an email marketing company, amongst other ventures. And while some of them had moderate success, I had a much bigger company that wasn't getting my entire focus, which was by far my biggest opportunity. Had I set clearer constraints, what I am allowed to bring into my life and what I'm not, I would have had a lot more success on the more important things that I could have focused on. So a few strategies I've since used to cultivate selective ignorance in my business is predetermined decisions so you know how much you can divert your focus. Put a time constraint on researching new spaces. Limit the options that you go deep on. By ignoring the noise to focus on the signal, cultivating selective ignorance can lead to less distractions, reduced stress, improved concentration, and a more joyful interaction in the world. So my challenge to you right now is to build selective ignorance framework into your own life so you can start to remove the things that aren't serving you and focus on the things that really matter. If you want to see more videos about how systems can improve your life and help you reach your goals faster and easier, check out this video right here, and thanks for watching.